Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 155th New Social Environment. I'm Malvika Jolly, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation between special guest, artist Jacolby Satterwhite, and our very own Sara Roffino. We're also thrilled to have the poet Jenn Fisher here with us this afternoon, who will read to close today's program. This October also marks the Rail's 20th anniversary, which kicked off in October 2000 with the philosophy of remaining free and independent. And we're so lucky to be celebrating 20 years of conversations just like this one with this conversation. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and the Shinnecock Indian Nation, the traditional owners of the unceded land and waters on which we stand. Additionally, the Brooklyn Rail stands in solidarity with the uprisings currently unfolding across the country following the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Nina Pop, David McAtee, James Gerlach, Jamel Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, Rhea Milton, Dominique Remy Fells, and Toyin Salau, and countless others. And in response to generations of structural violence against Black communities, Black Lives Matter and will continue to support ongoing action in the struggle for racial justice. Before I introduce our illustrious guests of the afternoon, we invite you to join us for a brief moment of silence. Thank you. And now to introduce our illustrious host, Sara Roffino is an editor, writer, and researcher. She was most recently the executive editor of Cultured magazine and was the managing editor of this fine publication, The Brooklyn Rail, from 2013 to 2015, big ups. She was also the senior and executive editor of Art and Auction from 2015 to 2017. She works as a freelance editor and researcher for artists and art historians and is currently overseeing the archives and catalog raisonné research for painter Larry Poons. Her writing has appeared in a variety of publications. Some of them are Art and Auction, The Brooklyn Rail, Modern Painters, Cultured, Bomb, ArtNet, Galerie, the art newspaper Artseen, and The Observer, among many others. In 2019 and 2010, she also lived in Lisbon on a Fulbright scholarship, which I'm very curious about. Without further ado, Sara, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So just to give an introduction to Jacolby and firstly say thank you for having me. I have known Jacolby's work since his Recess residency, which was many years ago. So it's really an honor to speak with him today. And to give an introduction to Jacolby, Jacolby Satterwhite was born in 1986 in Columbia, South Carolina. He currently lives and works in Brooklyn. Jacolby is celebrated for a conceptual practice addressing crucial themes of labor, consumption, carnality, and fantasy through immersive installation, virtual reality, and digital media. He uses a range of software to produce intricately detailed animations and live action film of real and imagined worlds, populated by the avatars of artists and friends. These animations serve as the stage on which the artist synthesizes the multiple disciplines that encompass his practice, namely illustration, performance, painting, sculpture, photography, and writing. Satterwhite draws from an extensive set of references, guided by queer theory, modernism, and video game language, to challenge conventions of Western art through a personal and political lens. An equally significant influence is that of his late mother, Patricia Satterwhite, whose ethereal vocals and diagrams for visionary household products and serve as the source of material within a decidedly complex structure of memory and mythology. So that's quite a lot of information, but I was sort of thinking we could start with what seems to be the sort of typical beginning of a conversation during the pandemic, which is, you are a very social person. You work with your friends. They are an important part of your practice. So I'm wondering if you can talk just a little bit about what this time has been for you and how you have continued making and being engaged creatively.
Well, the paradox about my extensive kind of documentation archive where I like, you know, host a lot of my friends and performers and people who inspire me on the green screen. I mean, usually those things are sort of like 5% of the practice. I usually have really major isolated events where I set up, you know, a, a photo shoot or a performance event or a relational aesthetics event at a hotel or at a party or or I'll rent out a studio and solicit people to come by and shoot. But that's usually just like maybe 1 or 2 days. And then like 98% of the time, it's just me in my studio alone in a very primal and hermited way, kind of like meditating over that footage that I spent, you know, 8 to 16 hours getting. But it's more like, you know, it's pretty much on, you know, after the quarantine, it's pretty much allowed me to really meditate even more and marinate even more and concentrate more how to like massage and refine that footage. So I just kind of like spent this time in the pandemic to kind of collect myself, get centered, learn how to code in C# better because I'm making video games now, and just expand the practice more. You know, like the older I get, the less I'm extending my body and others, and more I'm thinking about the process and finding soul in the digital medium, you know? That
So,
bringing the haptic into the digital medium.
yeah, that's actually a great point for our next question, because I think your work has taken on such a sophisticated digital practice. It has become, I'm wondering if you can actually just talk us through, those of us who are a little more analog, like how you actually, I know that you hand render the figures, but if you can just talk us through a little bit about how you actually produce the digital and now virtual reality pieces that are in the show at Mitchell, Innes, and Nash.
Well, I always tell people that my foundation is rooted in a really rigorous painting education at Maryland Institute College of Art. It was like super ridiculously crazy. And so it was like 14 hours a day of trying to figure out the foundation, the figuration and abstraction and intersection. And like, you know, like I had to find mastery in a certain kind of like very visceral and haptic kind of like tactile, you know, process. And so when I started to shift into performance and animation, I kind of took those disciplines with me, and I process organizing space and information through that lens. So when I work, I'm thinking about, you know, I'm always trying to make a pastoral concert scene or make something with great figure and ground and depth of field. And like, I'm thinking about composition, and I'm thinking about geometry, and I'm thinking about the golden ratio. I'm very formalist in that way. So, and I'm always thinking about like the palette. Like when you're making a painting, you maybe have a limited palette. When I'm making a digital piece, my palette is my 40 gigabyte hard drive, whereas I've like, you know, collected 30 or 40 performances from passerbyers who go on my green screen and gesticulate based on my performance prompts. And so I'll have to, you know, like I have a limited palette of amazing queer people and amazing bodies from different other personal mythologies. That is a conceptual and postmodern palette. That's a post-structuralist palette. And that's a conceptual palette. The other palette is my mother's drawings that I reference in the work, which my mother made schematic diagrams of common objects around the house when I was a kid, because she was, you know, diagnosed with schizophrenia, and that's her schizophrenia gave her this wonderful delusion of grandeur that she was in like Da Vinci an inventor, and she would make thousands of drawings and send them off to paid programs in the home shopping network. And those drawings are definitely an archive and a palette for me. Like they are more of a performance score palette. Thinking about the drawings, like the text in the drawings are like, you know, a hammer, a lever, a pulley, a bowl. You know, I think about these objects. I think about animism as an archive and a palette, and I take these drawings and I limit them and I trace them and I build them in CGI, and I can metastasize and create these architectural landscapes with the drawings that I rendered in 3D. And then I composite these performances from other people by putting them in After Effects. But basically I'm saying in a very, very filibustery way, is that like, I think about my digital, the way I keep the haptic and the soulfulness in my process is to touch and feel everything, whether I'm tracing her drawings, whether I'm uploading and compositing my dance performance onto the computer, other people's dance performance on the computer, mocapped data from my own movement onto a CGI figure. It's all about consolidating, you know, living energy into something that is normally preserved for a cold manner. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it does. And going back a little bit, so I know you studied at MICA, and I know you studied painting there. And before that, as a child, as 12, I think you were, when you had cancer. You were sick as a child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And spent a lot of time on the screen playing video games.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you can fill in a little bit of what happened. I know you recovered, and for
Mm-hmm.
you, making was the affirmation of your existence. You've talked about how creating was this sort of affirming, I guess, to yourself in some ways in the world that you were still alive. And I'm wondering if you can draw out a little bit more of what happened after your recovery and when you got to MICA, and sort of how you, go ahead.
Well, after my recovery, so my doctor said there was like a 50-50 chance that they would amputate my arm. And, you know, I was making drawings since I was 3, specifically because I was trying to help my mother make drawings. And my doctor was like, you know, you might not be able to make drawings anymore, kid, because we don't know, this is a very radicalized surgery that we're going to do. And I was so worried because drawing was my first love. And so when I woke up, the first thing I did was move my hand, and I could move my hand, and I was really happy. And I remember when I had on this cast, actually, I'm going to get this drawing. I had this crazy big cast on my arm, and I guess 2 weeks later, when I was more mobile and able to move my arm, I was like, oh, I can move my forearm. Oh my God, I can move my hand, so I can make a drawing. And the first drawing that I made was this drawing of Madonna when I was a kid.
Amazing. Amazing.
This was the first drawing I made with my cyborg arm. See, I have like a fake arm. But so I made this drawing of Madonna, and that was like, okay, I'm an artist, and I can do it. I can keep going. And then I applied to boarding school at the Governor's School for South Carolina. And I studied painting there for 2 years, and I got into MICA, and I got super into it, and I wanted to be like this German expressionist, Neo Rausch, like crazy painter. Like I had like all these aspirations to be like Albert Olin. Like I had so many dreams. Like I had so many heroes in painting, but those heroes were getting in the way of my own spirit and my own dialogue in the studio and my own critique. And I had to abandon the painting for a bit and go to stick to my own body and my own personal mythology to find, you know, a better way of making things.
What about them was getting in the way? What was that sort of rift?
Well, I feel like all of my it was just like all the dialogue, because in the 2000s, during the Bush era, painting was so rooted in capitalism, and the Charles Saatchi era, and everything was so like, just calculated. And they were like, why aren't you making this kind of painting like this black person? Like there were like superstar black people at that time, and all the teachers wanted their students to mimic them in order to fill the rubric because we're paying for school. And I guess they were like, well, why are you black and using an express? You're a queer black person, you should be painting this way. You know, it was sort of like pigeonholing me, and the dialogue didn't allow me to find it, to anchor me into a place that really spoke to my personal truth. And I felt like I was a really ambitious painter, but I feel like because of being black and with white teachers and being misunderstood, I wasn't receiving the proper dialogue to help me grow. So I had to go to myself. I had to go back home, get my mother's drawings and say, oh my God, my mother's a better drawer than my teachers. She has Gertrude Stein level double entendres in her language. Her drawings have beautiful line weight and composition, and they're sparse and they're scarce, and I can learn from these more than them. So in the tradition of refusing painting, I took a Dada and Fluxus approach, and using the performance score through spontaneous written language. And my mother's drawings had that spontaneous language. And so I used her drawings and that spontaneous written language to generate performance videos. Then I applied to Scott Vegan School for Painting and Sculpture with that, and I got in. And then I really took off because I was around these like-minded artists who were really experimental and willing to fail. And so I started teaching myself how to animate. And I learned through that process how I was sick of just doing performances, because I'm a maker. I like to touch things. So through the process, I was able to, sorry, I'm getting lost in my thought. I was able to touch again, because I learned through rotoscoping and tracing my mother's drawings. I could trace those drawings and build these objects in the architectural program, put them and make these pastoral concert 3D animated landscapes and put my body in those landscapes. And I can explore the discipline of painting through a 5-dimensional way, which became way more sophisticated now because I'm doing virtual reality and augmented reality and video games and sculpture, and it's all now this really porous kind of like expansive thing.
And so when you went to Penn, you were already working digitally? That was your grad program?
I was working digitally, but it was just rooted. It was very foundational. It was very like bare bones. It was more about my point and shoot camera. And I was doing more like traditional 60s and 70s durational performance art stuff. And some of those performances I actually have now activated in current pieces. You know, I revisited them and like actualized them. Like you can see a performance I did 9 years ago in Philadelphia in the Room for Doubt sculpture at the Mitchell & Nash show. So performance was a major thing. I've actually injured my body intensely through a very rigorous performance practice over the past 10 years. So I do less of it now, but you know.
And I don't want to focus too much on this word, but I'm curious. It piqued my curiosity because it is something I wanted to talk about. But you said that you refused painting or you rejected painting, but I don't. And maybe that was not exactly what you meant. But I think painting still is important to you, and so I'm wondering.
No, it is very important.
Yeah. Okay. So can you talk a little bit? If one walks into your show, they might not realize that, but once somebody starts understanding your practice a little more, it becomes really clear and really obvious that you're still very much engaged with painting.
Well, I mean, conceptually engaged with the history and the lore of painting, and I use the allegories and the mythos around historical painting pieces as anchors for me to give entry points to my own mythologies and world building techniques. And so like, you know, for my show, I was thinking about, you know, I've always been obsessed with the theme of the pastoral concert. You know, like Titian and Manet made pastoral concerts, which are basically these paintings that survey the humanities. So people folly in a landscape, meditating on music and humanities and poetry. And but Manet's particular pastoral concert, Luncheon on the Grass, was controversial because painting has this like uppity elite kind of preservation for the divine. And so when he painted regular people in this luncheon and a nude female figure, it ushered in modernism because painting was beginning to explore aspects of truth, which later on Picasso expanded into with, you know, Cubism. But for me, I was like, in 2020 with the pandemic and our truth of being discombobulated, we're in this disinformation age, the era where confusion is being weaponized by politicians in order to control us, in a time where data is being mined to control us, in a time, you know, like we're in this really chaotic, new, crazy era that's beyond postmodernism. I think modernism is fucking broken. It's broken. Modernism's broken. Postmodernism's broken. It's all broken. So I was like, how can I reactivate Luncheon on the Grass in my exhibition by like making, you know, the neon of Luncheon on the Grass is kind of like the, it's a signifier of the show that gives you entry point that I'm actually remaking a 3D animated virtual reality pastoral concert, but instead of folly and focus on the humanities of music, you having my mother's, you know, we'll talk about that later, but like this, my mother wrote all the songs and she sung all the songs that are playing in the background. So it is a video about songs and poetry, but the song is called We Are in Hell When We Hurt Each Other. And in the video is this like 2020 simulacra video of like, you know, all the chaos but pandemic and civil unrest. And I recorded footage at protests against trans people being murdered and Breonna Taylor. And I recorded all this video and I embedded it in there. But one thing that's happening consistently and in this alternate reality is that the divine figure is expressed, and it's a black woman who has all these biological threats being thrown at her, and she's breaking them. She's enduring, she's thriving. And that is my way of like inverting Luncheon on the Grass. You get it?
Yeah. I think it would also be great to talk about, because to talk about the use of your mom's words I think specifically in this show to start with, perhaps, you know, you walk in and for me, the first thing I felt was we are in hell when we hurt each other. And I want to know why. Yeah, I can, my first thought was that it was immediately about social media and this trap that
No,
we're
she wrote
all.
that song in 1999.
No, I understand that, but that was like the application that I felt for how it means right
Oh,
now. Like we're in this place
yeah.
that we, it sounds really cynical, and I don't know if this is, I don't think this is how you meant it, but
I think you
I
are
don't,
on point.
I don't, like it's so dark and it's so confusing to, you know, I think we all had, I don't know, maybe not everybody, but I really had this feeling this summer, seeing the protest, being a part of this moment, but also knowing that the way that we are engaging with it is the actual apparatus that is causing us all these problems, which is all through Instagram and social media. And the way that that, like literally financially, economically, politically, the way that that has hurt, that makes us hurt each other.
Yeah,
So it's
I
like
agree.
this,
That is exactly why I did choose to like censor that part, that censored this song from my album and my mother's song. I felt like, you know, coincidentally, it does parallel with the spirit of the times where, you know, social media has become this porous demigod. Like we have collectively embodied a digital space where we cancel each other, and it's just like there's a lot of like revenge culture, resentment culture, and all of the perils of the last 400 years have like come back to bite itself in the ass, you know? And a lot of, you know, a lot of arbitrary weaponization against each other is happening in a way where like people are walking the tightrope and creativity is being lost and the arts are being lost and compromised and everything's becoming fascistic and propaganda. Like the left is becoming just as fascist as the right. It's like we are in hell when we hurt each other. And and like with climate change happening, it causes a pandemic. Like it's not just a bat in a bat suit. It's actually like we literally are overusing our resources that is causing bacterials that that's making our bodies sick. We're using this iPhone and our dopamine is being released from rewards of hitting the like button because we're getting sick. We're just sick, you know, it's a sick world. And that is true. That is why I used it. It is sort of kind of didactic and woke, but I don't. But at the same time, it's kind of irreverent and tongue-in-cheek at the same time. Like I have an objectivity. I'm not trying to tell you a lesson, but I'm trying to like envelop a spirit.
yeah, I didn't feel like it was didactic. I felt like it like had I mean, you're not saying that in any way. It's just, and it can be, and you know, it's as the drawing shows right here, it has its roots. And maybe you can talk a little bit about the album that you made and your mom's words. But I think it's clear that it's sincere source material for you and it's speaking to you and it's not trying to tell us something. It's like the way that the video, you know, has the footage and ends with Breonna Taylor. It's like we are this, there's such a, I don't know, it's like, it felt very sincere. It didn't feel didactic. It didn't feel.
It's just what it is. It's like, yeah. I was in my house. There were people protesting downstairs from my house in Brooklyn. I was, you know, had my GoPro and my camera going outside and recording this stuff. And I was just really overwhelmed. I was really scared. I was just like, all of my certainty was lost. All the things that I worked so hard to preserve feel like they're completely like shifted. And like I could only work in the most primal way. And that was just it. And luckily it's kind of weird and prophetic that I was able to like have this source material that was made before this year, you know, like a lot of this stuff started gestating long before this year. And it's just interesting. It's almost like a premonition. The show has a very premonition vibe.
Well, I think we all felt it happening. We all felt these movements and this energy, and it literally erupted this summer. So yeah. It was, you know, it was feeling things. It was observing what was happening. I think all of us, I'm curious, actually, one question that I have is about how your specific language has evolved this summer, because I think we've all collectively as a society, like our language has evolved this summer. And I'm wondering how your language as an artist has progressed this summer.
I feel free. I feel like I don't have, I'm not apologetic anymore. I just feel like I'm just in a, I don't know, my language has evolved crazy. I feel like I have more agency. With like the tools that I use, just because having that time with myself. I felt like before the pandemic, I was being pulled from every corner of the art world and in my private life. And I was saying yes to everything. And I feel like it was trying to kill me. And I felt like I was just trying to like, I felt misunderstood and all these things. And I felt like I had time to like spiritually recollect and reset and take care of myself and learn how to do transcendental meditation. Well, I didn't really learn how to do that yet, but I'm trying. But learn how to just do a lot of extreme self-care and regimentation and studying and reading and learning. And I learned about pace. And so with learning about pace, I just have more, I just feel more, I can do what I want. That's what I feel.
I think also something that you've obviously spoken about a lot and is a part of your practice. And I wonder how it has, well, so your work is often talked about as being queer art or existing in a queer space, and the digital space is a queer space. But I also came across an interview where you push against that and call it, and say it's like a clickbait pigeonholing. And I'm sort of wondering, I think what we've all seen sort of happen in a way is there's a sort of like, a way that social media determines identity that is so one-dimensional and reductive for all of us.
Absolutely, it's so annoying and cheesy, and and I hate to lose faith in people. I'm like, are we this basic? But we're not. Hopefully,
well, we're not. But we're like all using this one platform for so much of our existence right now, and so I'm wondering if you can talk about, or just like talk about what your feelings are right now about how the idea of queer art feels to you right now.
Well, I think that there's a seismic shift in awareness, and there's a lucidity happening with like the nuances of gender and gender expression and subjectivity and objectivity. Like, we're aware of the spectrum more than ever. I think the spectrum has become the zeitgeist right now, and so that's just like being sledgehammered down our conscious. But I think that as that goes on, we're going to have a much more complex conceptual, atmosphere. I feel like already when you look at the sense of humor of the internet now, it's becoming more obscure and niche and weird, because we are respecting the spectrum. It's not just a binary anymore. It's not ones and zeros. It's kind of like, a grayscale. And I think that's really beautiful and rewarding, and I'm excited about it because, it's not queer. It's just about the grayscale. Mm-hmm. Or the chromatica. Gaga.
So the first performance I saw of yours was actually at a recess benefit, and I feel like it was 2013, maybe, quite a few years ago when I stopped to think about it. And congratulations on now being the Studio Museum mid-career resident. This is the first time they are having a mid-career artist. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, one, what you want to do with this time and space, and two, the role of mid-career, and sort of that means that there are 3 other artists who are participating, who are sort of looking to you as their more experienced, knowledgeable guide. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about what sorts of things you think are important for them to, or what you want to share with them, what you want to do with your space, with your residency, and what you want to pass on to them.
Well, ultimately, ever since the Studio Museum was a major, it was one of the first institutions I exhibited with. I've exhibited with them 4 or 5 or 6 times, and they've been incredibly supportive of me. But also, even before I exhibited with them, they had groundbreaking exhibitions like Corey Newkirk's exhibition were really inspiring for me to go down the road that I went. And ultimately, being in the legacy with, David Hammonds and Micheline Thomas and Kehinde Wiley and, Simone Lee and Paul Saboye, like all these people who I adore creatively, I felt like, it just felt like something I wanted to do before I died. Like I wanted to be a black in that black canon in any kind of way. And I think I got really depressed in the studio because, my having such a rigorous exhibition schedule and saying yes to everything, I felt like I didn't have room to intellectually breathe. And I felt like I lost all of my art friends. And I felt like I needed some kind of arbitrary way to anchor me into a critical dialogue. And so, I was like, why don't I try doing a studio museum? That was just because I was just feeling dead inside. And, I got in, but when I got in, I was like, I felt like it was be tone deaf to accept the residency in this climate where I feel like artists need a chance to, so I kind of turned it down and we created a new residency that will allow me to have that critical dialogue. Like I don't get a stipend or money or anything, but I just get to have a critical dialogue and I get to have an essay written with, like I get to write, I get to write and I get to talk with theorists. I get to talk with legacy. I get to, be in the aura of Thelma Golden. And it's just more about shifting the energy so I can take new chances and try new experiments and stuff. And I also want to be in dialogue with, some of the fresher artists who are, like all three of those artists are so incredible. I hate they call it like, there's no mentorship. I don't have anything to mentor, but I can be in dialogue with fresh minds and I can, we can bounce back and riff off of each other. And it's just about collectivity. That's all.
Amazing. So this is also the first year because of their building and the pandemic, it's all happening remotely. So what does that residency actually look like for you at this point?
We're doing lots of Zoom meetings, and I guess we're going to it's going to evolve as things, open up, but I'm working on the special projects that are digital and VR, and I want to do some GoPro 360 video in Harlem and try to expand. Like I'm trying to do some really radical things, and I want to like contextualize myself as an artist who was in the pandemic year. And so we're going to figure that out as we go. But I think we're going to focus heavily on the criticality part in regards to dialoguing with amazing art historians and writers, and just like it's more about fostering intellectual conceptual rigor and really pushing new projects and new ideas. And it's very experimental, but it feels very, very real in the same way that it would have before.
Amazing. Well, I, for one, look forward to seeing what you do. And I'm wondering, so dance and performance are a big part of your practice. Can you talk a little bit about just your background with movement? Are you formally trained as a dancer, or if you could?
Well, my brother was a backup dancer for like NSE, all these like singers and stuff. And I think like he almost did something with Mariah Carey, but I'm not sure. But he was like he's still a good dancer, but he's older. He's 14 years older than me, and I kind of learned I think a lot of my movement vocabulary is a derivation of his. However, when I started to shift into performance, and I used a very modernist approach to, and also like ballroom culture was a big thing in my teens. Like my friends were all like in houses and stuff. And so I kind of like knew that vernacular as well. But like, I think when my vernacular became more specific, it was because I started to imitate the modernist dance practices of Anne Teresa de Keersmaker and William Forsythe and Pina Bausch and Maurice Cunningham. I was thinking about drawing as a device to kind of structure dance. And so I was using my mother's drawings as an anchor for my movement. So I would pretend like I was using a drawing of her hammer, a drawing of her levers, a drawing of her pulley. And I was doing variations of movements around these banal objects on the green screen until doing it 8 hours a day for, months and months, for years and years. Eventually a lexicon kind of like gestated through just pure repetition and practice, and I wasn't even aware of it. And then it became this geometric and structural dance thing, and I was like, well, I love it. I love dancing. Unfortunately, I hurt my back, so I can't dance as much anymore, but I love dance. And I love movement as a kind of compositional device in image making, Like when I use my movement, it's just a way to acquire angles and shapes in the 3D animation landscape.
And that actually brings up another point, which is about perspective, because I think that is something there was a quote you had that was like, I don't want to break the fourth wall, I want to break the fifth wall. And I think that goes back to your relationship to painting. I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about some of the more the digital ideas of perspective and where you are looking to explore that within your work.
So can you ask that question again?
I guess I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about perspective within your work. So,
perspective, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm all about the Gestalt theory. I'm all about the x-axis and the y-axis and the z-axis sculpturally. That is why I produced a visual album, because I wanted to bring objecthood back to the album, where, you know, streaming services on Spotify and iTunes has destroyed the physicality of the album as a sacred and secular object that you like listen to over and over and protect and not get scratched. And so I thought, like, in 2020, in this new decade, how can I do that? And so I, you know, through SF MoMA commissioned me to make this visual album, which is basically derived from my mother's archive of songs and melodies she wrote in the mental hospital. She also wanted to make jingles and commercials for like commercials, and she wanted to make folk songs and pop albums. And I found these to be very poetic and interesting African American Southern folk music. But I wanted to make these cassette tapes into a trip hop and electronic record. So I basically spent 2 years producing this record, but I also thought, like, once I make this record, I'm going to make it a hour and 24-minute 3D animated film, an hour and 24-minute virtual reality film, because what I wanted to achieve from this is that when you are experiencing this sonic experience, you have to look at the x-axis and listen to the album to achieve a certain kind of synesthesia. You have to look at the y-axis and listen to the album and achieve a certain kind of synesthesia. And it brings back a certain kind of like perspectival and sonic relationship that allows re-entry to this object. And so that's how I think of perspective, as like more so devices for re-entry.
And do you think about it also in relation to historical painting as well, or less?
Well, yeah, I mean, Piero della Francesca is one of my favorite painters, and he mastered one-point perspective. And then there's some who master axial perspective. There's like Japanese prints or axial perspectives. That's very important for me. Like when you think about high Renaissance paintings, the perspective is multiple, because there's the cherubs and the angels in top. I use that compositional device all the time in my work. You can see it if you think about it. I'm always thinking about Madonna at the top and the cherubs and the common people at the bottom. I use that device. I use like those compositional perspectival devices constantly. I love also like fragmented cubistic perspective. Also like flattened perspective, like the kind that Malevich and the supremacists use in their work. You know, I'm into geometric extraction. I'm also interested in perspective of the body gesture. That's why mocapping my movement, like with abstract expressionists, perspective was about how you hit the canvas, how you use your body, you know, and that perspective is evidence of the body.
And in terms of the old masters, there's the large sculpture or installation in the show, The Incredulity of St. Thomas, which is a work that, from my understanding, you have been looking at and responding to since you were a teenager. Can you talk a little bit about what that work, like why that work has resonated so much with you?
Well, yeah, The Incredulity of St. Thomas, Doubting Thomas by Caravaggio, it's evolved. My obsession with it has been permanent, but in the last couple of years, I figured out the true meaning of my relationship with it. The painting was used in the Renaissance as a way to, it was propaganda and a way to promote faith and ritual in the church. It was also a painting that was an allegory about skepticism. And this piece that I made at my show at Mitchell and Nash, I made these giant sculptural figures and embedded video monitors that show a performance of me covered in 5 layers of acrylic paint, redacting and demarcating a virus on a Xerox, a 20-foot print of the virus on a Xerox. And so basically it's an anthropomorphized version of anthropomorphized performance video of me, personifying an antibody, where I'm erasing this virus with acrylic paint on a giant 20-foot Xerox, and it's inside of these figures that are like pointing. They're the skeptic. They're the skeptic in a pandemic. It's a very tongue-in-cheek way of reflecting a certain kind of like zeitgeist of today's sort of skepticism, confusion, paranoia. And also like another personal and private reason why I like the skeptic of the allegory is that like I make objects to prove to myself that I am real. I kind of feel like we're in a simulation sometimes, and it's so strange that I like modern technologies kept me alive from, sickness. And I sometimes think like, oh my God, I cheated and I hacked life, so I make art objects for that reason. So that's kind of, I have a very meta narrative approach to that piece,
And so what has been displayed on the screens when you've shown this work in the past? Because it was also at the fabric workshop.
There's always those.
Okay, so it's just taken on a new meaning within the pandemic, but it's always been.
Yeah, it was like, oh my God, this piece.
Okay. Oh wow, that's crazy.
I was like, oh fuck. I'm like, what? Am I like that so Raven? Like.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think the piece is also about ritual, which is something that you have talked about and I think touched on somewhat in your work. And I'm wondering if you can talk about one, what ritual means to you from a personal cultural perspective, but also what some of your just working rituals are in the studio in your day-to-day existence.
Well, ritual is a way for like chance and possibility to find its way through the cracks. If you don't have that, you're not confident enough to make you're not confident enough to grow. And so I use like regimentation and ritual and belief systems and try to find a spiritual center so I can, achieve better, so I can achieve enough confidence to enter the spontaneous realm. That's all. Yeah.
Do you have rituals like when you're making, or
I work out, I exercise, I do. I don't know, I work on art all day. I do have a lot of rituals. I can't explain them, but they're like around self-care and working and keeping a system. And like, I don't know. It's more just about, I just work on art all day. That's my ritual.
So one more question, which is something that I ask artists a lot, but I think is particularly resonant with you. It's something that I'm personally just drawn to talking about and curious about, but your work is obviously dealing with heavy conceptual, historical, social realities, and it's not light in any sense, but there is a joy in it, and there's a real palpable sense of, you feel a joy that emanates from the work. I think you as a person,
absolutely,
feel that.
absolutely.
I'm just wondering if you can talk about how I think there's so much like psychological heaviness around artists and but like what I find is there's actually often more joy, and I'm wondering if you can talk about the joy in your work and your relationship to that.
Well, I mean, like, even if my work is outsourced and rooted from a painful place, it's sort of like I'm exercising that. And even though it's also joy, it's a painful process to make the work, but when it's made, it's joyful. And but like from looking back at the past 5 years of work, I could see a great deal of darkness in it, but like also there's a lot of optimism just because I made it. Like, it's sort of like free therapy. It's sort of like a cathartic way for me to not do other more self-harming things. It's just like, I negotiated and marinated and modulated all of these weird, positive and negative things through the process of creation. But, now I kind of only want to operate from abstraction and joyful places and optimism. I mean, I look back at the past 5 years of work, and I definitely feel like, my next piece debuting in 2022 is, well, whatever. It's called Dawn for a reason, because I feel like it's the pursuit of light. And then, modernism was about the pursuit of light. Light is the truth. So I want to make more, I think it's, less carnality and more optimism. I think that like I'm in a better place. So I definitely want to I definitely am operating and pivoting from joy at this moment, even in times like this.
Yeah, I don't think like it's I think if there's something that I feel like this moment has made me, or like a thought that I want to hold on to, is that joy is the essential part of any sort of change or resistance or hoping that things will be better. I don't see how, which I think is part of what's so infuriating about all of the media and social media and extreme, just everybody yelling at each other, is that it just eliminates any space for that. But on that note, unless there's any other parts of your practice that you want to talk about, I think we could open it up for Q&As, but I would be happy to hear if there's other things that you feel like should be included before we do
No,
that.
there's nothing else.
Okay. So
Thank you both so much. I feel like we're like a German engineered train today. We're like meeting our marks. Look at us. Our first question comes from the lovely Serena Caffrey. Serena, you should be able to turn on your microphone now.
Thanks so much. Thank you all so much for this conversation. It's been such a privilege. I'm so grateful to see your work today and hear from you. And I forget how I worded it in the chat, but basically I wanted to ask about your experience of deep reflection and self-care that you described during the pandemic. Can you hear me okay? Mm-hmm. And how you're thinking about taking the lessons that you learned from that time this time of deep rest into your life and practice as capitalistic pressures resume. It's something
I don't think they
struggling
ever
with.
stop resuming. I think the pressures got way more intense, and I haven't rested a bit. So, but I was allowed to not do things that were unnecessary, that were like filler and getting in the way of the real work. And so like from now on, it's just about doing the real work. I just think my values are just more pared down. I'm going to go in, if we have the fortune to go back into some sort of fragment of normalcy, which I pray. I think that like I developed enough muscle memory to like go back in a way that was more productive and just like continue these survival techniques and rituals and foundations and critical life skills that can allow me to like thrive in the world that we were in before.
Thank you both so much. Our next question will come from Lynn Crawford. Lynn, you can turn on your microphone now.
Hi, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and for your beautiful work. This sounds like a very basic question, but it's endlessly fascinating to me, which is the difference between message-driven and art. And I love hearing artists I admire discussing that. So if you wouldn't mind riffing on.
Could you ask that question again? What is the difference between?
For you, what's the connection between message-driven and art?
Oh, like message-driven art and just like making things?
Well, in your mind, like when you think this is a message I'm behind, right? But then when you make it into art, I'm interested in that process.
I arrived to the message after the process first. It's all about abstract incubation. I let the message reveal itself to me like a Rorschach test, like I'm in therapy. You can learn through like basic foundational tendencies what you're trying to achieve subconsciously just because you're a living person and you're breathing. So you could do a still life of a shoe, and the way you painted that shoe is going to reveal certain kind of like, it's sort of like, graphology. And so I usually like do banal processes in the studio, like things that are like have no meaning. And then I find meaning through repetition and ritual of like the mere process of mere investigating formalisms and materials and making sure that they're crafted well. And when I commit to the craft and quality and structure, I find out what the message is, because I'm a living person. I'm a sad person. I'm a happy person. I'm a like frustrated person. I have anxiety, and whatever I'm trying to negotiate and fight with comes through midway to the end. And then I can do my campaign talking about the work with y'all.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you so much. I also love your backdrop. It's gorgeous.
I love that painting. Yeah.
I'm like, can we hear a little bit?
It's a tapestry from my husband's family in Lebanon.
Thank you. So our next question, I'm going to voice, but it came from Serena Caffrey in the chat and a couple other people percolating. And that is that the people want to hear you talk more about your process of declining the original Studio Museum residency, sort of what motivated that, what spaces that opens up, and how did you negotiate the program that you wanted to see? How do you create that kind of opportunity that is specifically the thing that you want, that still leaves in the, in the remainder, the thing that you want available for others? Like, how did you go about doing that?
I don't know. After the pandemic, time shifted so fast and moved. Like, my original purpose was that I was broke and I needed a studio and I wanted to make paintings. But the pandemic wasn't formed yet. But when the pandemic got crazier and crazier, I was like, I have way more resources than a lot of the people who applied. I have a representation, I have institutional presence. And so I can't take this away from someone. That would be so stupid. Somebody needs to thrive, but there's no entry anymore. It's like art schools are being closed. Everything is just a mess. So I couldn't do that. So I just decided, but I did, the middle ground was, I get to be a part of this legacy and have a dialogue and write critical essays and create experiments and be up in a show. I just wanted to be in the legacy with my favorite people in the art world, and and also return to form, because Studio Museum is where I started. It's like my stomping ground. And so I just, it was more of a spiritual reset than anything. It's just like a conceptual thing for me to anchor myself and try again. Does it make sense?
Yeah,
I mean, I hope they don't
does,
get mad at me for revealing this to you, but whatever. I'm
No,
Wendy
but
Williams. How you doing? How you doing?
Love thinking of the Studio Museum as the spiritual reset, and that what you needed there was like first the space, but then the spiritual reset, and you can. Yeah, it makes me think of, this is like to go off script. It makes me think of like in Mean Girls at the end where they break up the tiara, and it's like it's like you didn't know you could do that. Our next question comes from our very own Cal, but it is co-written by Fong, Bui, and Cal. And you should be able to turn on your microphone.
Hi, Jacolby. Thank you so much for coming today and joining us, and thank you for your show. I really greatly enjoyed seeing it last week, and I want to go catch it once more time next week before it closes. But I had a question about if you see your work as in conversation at all with Jason Rhodes, just in terms of, well, first the use of neon in the show and kind of visual excess in general, or generosity.
I love Jason Rhodes. Yeah, I mean, I would say anyone who uses neon and written language in that way and signage and signifiers are in a tradition of Jason Rhodes and Tracy Emin and Bruce Nauman and Sarah Lucas and so many others who, usually like the neon is just sort of a sculptural way to like make the body into a modernist object, and it's the written language is an oratory thing. And so it's sort of like the neon language the neon sign is a way to like activate the brain to read the signage and speak it. And so, yeah, Jason Rhodes, I would say so. I love him. I don't know how we relate. We do relate probably. I'm a charged spirit, if that's a better word. So yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I can't really give you a specific way that we're related, but I do think I could actually, but I don't want to say.
That's okay.
Now I'm very curious.
I'm joking. I just want to make people like, I'm being controversial.
I feel like it contributes to the mystique to leave something unanswered. Our next question comes from Sean Capone. Sean, you can turn on your microphone now. Let's see. The pleasures of the live medium.
I think you unmuted me by accident.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Perfect.
Hi, Jacolby. So I just have a kind of maybe more boring question regarding professional practice. Can you talk about the challenges of working in video and animation as opposed to the painting and more traditional mediums which inspired you in the first place? Creatively speaking, but also how you work as a moving image / performance artist with institutions and collectors.
Okay, I love that question. Can you ask it one more time so I can like put it back together?
Yeah, sure. Can you talk about the challenges of working in video and animation as opposed to painting or more traditional mediums, specifically with how you deal with collectors and institutions?
Oh yeah, well, of course, like people have this weird hierarchy and respect for painting that's so arbitrary and foolish. And I feel like the way that I work with digital media is just as tactile, difficult, and exploring much. It's almost like I signed up for Calculus 5 and painters signed up for like geometry or something. I'm joking, that was arrogant, but whatever. It's true. I don't know. I don't really think about it because in the end of the day, when I'm dead, people like realize that like, oh, this is what you were doing. It's like multiply, I want to like leave something behind. I don't think of like there are challenges for collectors, but whatever, they'll catch up. I mean, I don't care about that. Like, I just want to make something that I believe in.
Do you take a hand in archiving the work?
Huh?
Do you take a hand in helping to archive the work or helping people understand what the work is about?
I'm archiving the work. I'm cleaning it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, yeah. I hope that wasn't like, that was a weird answer. I feel like I'm getting hungry and I'm starting to sound crazy. So I need to chill.
No, it was great. Thank you for that. Our final question will come from our very own publisher, Fong H. Bowie. Fong, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Malvika. Thank you, Jacolby. It's great to see you. And thank you, Sara Roffino, for hosting this talk. I was in the gallery the other week, and it was such a joy to see the whole installation, Jacolby, because I've been following your work for quite some time, and hearing what you've been saying about the broad perspective and appetite to be able to embrace the passion of the past. You know, you mentioned Piero della Francesca, but the video piece, when you talk about multiple perspective, it also reminded me of Paolo Uccello, the Battle of San Romano, because it's a matter of the way in which it's merry-go-round.
Oh yeah.
Those open horses, remember the tree panel? But there's also a sense of simultaneity of burlesque quality in the work, as much as it is arabesque and carnival-esque.
Yes, of course.
It's all three simultaneously existed in this installation now also, and the openness of it. I don't know what you're going to do next, but it's wherever is in this show can be explored into many shows to follow. So it was such a joy to see during this period.
I appreciate it so much. I really do. I love those comments. Did you mention Auerbach?
How about did I say that? No.
Oh, okay.
I meant to say that it's there's a simultaneity of burlesque, the quality of the burlesque, but of the arabesque.
Oh, yeah.
It's a carnival-esque. It's all of it coexisted.
No,
And
definitely. And I mean, you know, I lived in the Lower East Side in the club. Like a lot of my work, I'm kind of like Toulouse-Lautrec in that way, where like I would come home drunk with my sketchbook and my ideas, and I would put it into the computer. Like I was inspired by my nights in the queer scenes in the Lower East Side and the bars in Bushwick and what crazy, interesting, eccentric New Yorkers were doing. And a lot of that was showing up in the way that I built composition. Like it's from observation. A lot of my work is basically a simulacra of like New York nightlife, daily life, protest life. It's like an amalgamation of that. So you're right, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, but you know how in Chinatown, if a
in Chinatown,
not doing well, they always change the name very readily. So from Happy Delight will be Fat of something tomorrow Buddha. You know, they just change the neon and everything. It's, the food is the same, Jacolby, but the menu is completely changed, and so there's that sense in the work. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Great to see you.
Good to see
Back to you, Thank you, Fino.
Thank you, Fong. So we've come to poetry, not hour, but 6 minutes. So at the Rail, we have a tradition of ending lunch with a poem. This is a tradition we used to have in our offices pre-COVID, and we've been lucky enough to carry that out into these virtual events. So today I'm thrilled to welcome the poet Jenn Fisher to the stage. Jenn was born in Florida in 1981, a very auspicious year. Her first book, In the Mud, will be released in November of this year from Desuetude Gallery. That's a tongue twister. Her poetry has also appeared in the Quarterless Review, the Brooklyn Rail, Newest York, and Daggers magazine, among countless others. She lives and writes in Queens. And Jenn, take it away.
Thanks. I'm just going to read like one or two things, but I just want to say thank you so much for talking today, Jacolby. I've never seen your work, and I loved how you spoke about the spirit and language and how you move through the world and how you're able to take your language and put it into, you transform it through the stuff that you use, your materials. I don't know, I'm just like floored that I was able to sit here and see someone, and then to see your mother's work as well. It's just, my heart fell when I saw the title of your show. I was just like, wow, I can't believe it. Just feels so good. But yeah, so I'm honored to be able to close this off for you in this talk. So I'm going to read just a couple poems. They're pulled from the book, not in any particular order, but I just pulled a couple to read today. So, how are you? How are you? Must be a response not in vocal cords. Words don't work right now. I've been licking my dirty hands for weeks now, that there isn't enough soap to clean everything safe as the saliva drawn from. The belly holds the truth. Keep the belly honest. Primal instinct. I lick my hands for weeks now. My nails are your nails. Your back I scratch bleeds. You are a memory, my memory. My claws bleed with memories. Today is long. Naked, I undress and lay on the floor, cools my breast, my hips dig in and gnaw the wood because my mouth, for weeks, has only been filled with dirt. There is so much dirt under. My nails scratch your back. I deposit insect eggs. Larvae grow. They roam your body. Food on skin is licked clean. I've been licking my hands for weeks now. The larva turns to pods, emerald green encrusted with gold, looks like a mine cave or a bedrock. Your skin used to be my rock. I rocked you many times to sleep. Before, now, alone, I rocked myself to sleep. I scratched the emerald transparent. A butterfly flies, unfold wet against your wet, against wet blood. I scratched. My nails have so much dirt in them. I feed the flies dirt. They lift onto my nails that bleed. I open the window to release them. They fly, butterflies. I open the door. I leave. You already left. I see your trail. I walk another way. All right, I'm just going to read two more, if that's okay. April 13th. Slide toes into mud, knotted hair wrapped, clothes draped to cling to bones, roof of mouth and echo for mother tongue loud, screams from animal cries inside. With it, it is. Light vanishes, exist, under the rain, pain under cracked lips, open breath slides between teeth. I have lost my love. And then I'll read the last one. It's the first day of August, New York City. I swore and pissed behind the trash. I melted candles in the car. I put an ashtray on the dashboard. I wiped my pussy with witch hazel. I told him I didn't trust him. Then I told him I loved him. My enthusiasm is blanked. I stopped saying I believe. It's better to know or not know or make up. The lipstick only stays on my teeth. It's cheap. I'm cheap. I'm $400 short of rent, and I can't smoke inside. All right, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a very haunting reading. It was deeply beautiful. Thank you so much, Jenn, and thank you to you, Sara and Jacolby, and to all of you here with us today in the audience and the chat. Please join us again tomorrow for our 10th Radical Poetry reading, which will be curated by Alma Birch and Bennett Bergman, and will feature political poetry by an assortment of poets, including Cedar Sigo, David Millis, Michael Cavuto, Sarah Wang, and Shelley Marlowe, so nothing but illustrious guests over here. That will be, as always, at 1 p.m. right here in the Zoom. You can now turn on your microphones and say goodbye or shout out whatever you want as you leave, and have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you so
all
much.
so much.
Thanks, Jacolby. Thanks, Sara. Thank you, Jenn, for your
Thanks,
reading.
Jenn. Thanks, Sara. Thanks, Jacolby.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. This was great.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Jacolby.
you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sara.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenn.
Thanks, guys. Jacolby, it was so wonderful to learn about your work today. I'm so grateful. So thank you.
The show's still on view.
Hi, you guys. Thank you, Jenn.
Bye,
For beautiful
everyone.
reading.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roffino.
See you, Andrew. Good to see you.
Thank you, Jacolby. Hey,
Thanks for your
Jay.
questions, everyone.
Thank you so much. Hi, Jenn. Hey,
Bye.
Andrew. Karina. Bye.
Thanks, Jen. Bye.
Bye. Take care, you guys. Love and peace, and see you hopefully tomorrow.